So hello, and glad you all are still listening and enjoying the story. I kind of been excitedly writing these past couple chapters because of how intense they are. I hope you all are enjoying reading as I am enjoying writing this, and please feel free to comment your guesses of what happens next. Just a little warning, this chapter is a little brutal and a bit gory. You have been warned. Chapter 18. Far from the immediate chaos, in a secluded forest, Nicholas stood leaning heavily on a gnarled staff that seemed as old as he now felt. His silver hair, which used to be full of life, now looked thin and strikingly white, contrasting sharply with his quickly aging skin, marked by the wisdom and exhaustion of many centuries. He shut his eyes, feeling the thunderous sounds of the bizarre storm not just in his ears, but all the way down to his core. His mana well, which used to feel as endless as a wild river, now seemed like nothing more than a tiny puddle, just a fraction of what it used to be. Driving the cosmic dragon out of their realm had really taken a toll on him. He might still be powerful, but he's now weak and just a shadow of the archmage he used to be. He rarely touched his mana now, conserving the precious remnants. Each spell felt like it drained and eroded his already fragile existence. Yet he felt him, Dante, the surge of raw, unchanneled power, so vast and chaotic, was so undeniably his.
Such raw potential.
Nicholas whispered, the words lost to the wind.
Feels like an uncontrolled rage.
He knew what this storm meant. Dante found himself in a tight spot. Given the magnitude of the magical turmoil around him, it was clear that things were serious. Nicholas considered casting a teleportation spell to speed up his arrival, but he was well aware that it would sap his mana reserves significantly. The unknown dangers that lay ahead loomed large, and he realized he couldn't take the risk of wasting precious mana. Those days of impulsive bravery were behind him now. The chilly, damp breeze rushed past Dante as the beast woman kept up her quick pace. She alternated between running and leaping from tree to tree, practically gliding around unrestrained. He tried to strain against the ropes, tried to move a finger, a toe. A little tingle in his fingers and a slight twitch in his thumb filled him with a rush of hope to escape his predicament. The poison was wearing off slower than he wanted, but he was sure it was faster than it was supposed to be. The poison was wearing off slower than he'd hoped, but he was pretty sure it was still happening faster than it was meant to. His youthful and energetic physique, combined with his vast but turbulent pool of mana, was pushing back, fiercely dispelling the numbing influence. He clenched his teeth as a quiet thunderstorm brewed within him. He poured every bit of determination into his muscles and nerves as he felt another subtle twitch, followed by another, ripple through his body. He could feel the coarse fabric of the beast woman's cloak against his cheek, the slight sway of her powerful stride. She paused her movements and studied Dante. He felt her tightening her arm around him. Then, a sharp, concussive blow slammed into the back of his head. Darkness consumed him, swift and absolute, dragging him back into the terrifying depths of unconsciousness. Dante's dreamt again, but this time he was a furnace. No longer a rabbit, he was a raging inferno, formless and consuming. All he could think about was fire, white-hot flame, licking at everything, incinerating obstacles, reducing his enemies to ash. The betrayal, the helplessness, the shame of being dismissed, it all fueled the roaring blaze. He was a whirlwind of raw fury, craving nothing but to ignite, to annihilate, to purify with searing flames. The chaotic mana coursing through him warped his wish, longing not to control his magic, but to release devastating destruction. Hours later, as the hurricane began to subside into a mere gale, Ilaren and his scout squad found it. A hidden hollow, nestled deep within a thicket of old gnarled trees. A crude lean-to, camouflaged with moss and branches, served as the hideout.
She has to be in there.
Ellerin signaled silently to his squad. They spread out, gliding silently like shadows. Two mages were weaving their spells. The archer was drawing an arrow to his bowstring, and the rogue's daggers shimmered softly in the dim light. This was their domain, and they were its sworn protectors. They were the Vanguard, a unit known throughout Liatre for their unparalleled skill and effectiveness in protecting the elven woods from all threats. Many had underestimated them. No one has ever come out on top alive against their combined strength. But as they began to approach, a figure stepped out from the lean-to, as if expecting them. It was the Beast Woman. Her eyes, even in the dim light, held a glint of cruel amusement. A chilling, knowing smile played on her lips. She made no move to draw her 2 daggers from her hips.
"Well now,"
she purred, her voice low and confident.
"looks like the little prince's tantrum brought the neighborhood watch out, 5 on 1. How sporting of you skittish elves."
Ellerin squinted, sensing the uniqueness of the figure before him. This wasn't just any mercenary or assassin. This was a self-assured, nearly cocky professional.
What tipped you off to our presence?
He asked, gradually shifting into a defensive posture. His tone remained steady, yet resolute. The Beast Woman chuckled, a sound that grated on his nerves.
"I could smell the berries and leaves on your lips before we even joined the prince's entourage."
Ellerin felt a fear creep up his neck. She knew the entire time they were there. She was expecting us to react. Now Ellerin felt like he played into her trap.
Release the prince and we will be on our way.
Ellerin tried to sound confident and strong, but the Beast Woman was easily able to pick up on his fear pheromones.
"Release him, my dear elf. He's important merchandise I'm responsible for acquiring. Besides, I'm not quite finished playing with him, and you lot, you look like fun."
She sprang forward with a fierce speed that was surprisingly elegant, hiding a strength that was truly frightening. For the last few days, they've kept a close eye on her and thought they knew fighting capabilities. Even if she was concealing her real power, they were sure they could handle it, but they never expected it to be this bone-chilling different. The 2 elven mages immediately unleashed a volley of light-binding spells and a hail of sharpened ice shards. The Beast Woman didn't dodge so much as flow around them. Her movements were swift and fluid. The ice shards shattered harmlessly around her, and the binding spells seemed to lose cohesion as they neared her, dissipating into harmless motes of light. In an instant, she appeared among them, leaving everyone stunned by the astonishing swiftness of her arrival. A single, casual backhand sent one of the mages sprawling, skidding on the ground until his head cracked against a tree trunk with a sickening thud. The huge tree toppled over, knocking over several other trees nearby. His body spasmed like a chicken with its head chopped off. Her fighting technique looked simple. Without any extravagant moves, she delivered blows with astonishing force. The archer swiftly released 2 arrows that darted through the air and appeared right behind her. Their tips glinted menacingly as they aimed for her neck and kidney. Yet, with an incredible speed, she twirled around, dodging them effortlessly as if it were second nature to her. She suddenly showed up beside him just as he was about to take another shot, leaving him frozen in a state of panic. With a grip that felt like steel shackles, she clamped down on his wrists and twisted sharply. A horrifying crack rang out as the archer let out a choked cry, agony flashing across his face as his wrists snapped. Before he could fall, she drove her knee into his chest, then flung him aside like a rag doll. He hit the ground with a thud, struggling to catch his breath, but she paid him no mind, her eyes already locked on her next target.
You're good,
Ilarion murmured, his voice tight, his own daggers now drawn. He sprinted to meet her before she could chase after the other mage. Mana surged through his blades, unleashing a wave of searing heat. He spun around, but his strike only met empty air. She effortlessly ducked beneath his furious attacks, moving with the agility of a seasoned fighter. In a swift motion, she backflipped and kicked him away just as an arrow zipped by, barely missing her head. The Beast Woman lunged toward the rogue who had shot the arrow. Realizing how easily she'd dispatched the other archer, the rogue dropped her bow and drew her daggers. With a fierce fighting spirit, she aimed for the Beast Woman's joints. Just before impact, the Beast Woman slid her foot along the ground, flinging mud into the rogue's eyes. With a fierce swipe of her claws, she targeted the rogue's neck. Just a hair's breadth from impact, Alarin burst onto the scene, kicking the rogue aside, but not before her claws rake across the rogue's arm. Determined to keep fighting, he shifted his mana into a different element, summoning a fierce wind that howled around his blades, growing in intensity. He swung wildly at her vital spots, but he miscalculated and launched a striking attack at what he thought was an opening. She swiftly dodged beneath his blade, maneuvering around his arm and delivering a swift kick that sent him crashing into a nearby tree. With a smirk, the beast woman then turned her gaze toward the distant mage who was focused on channeling mana. Ignoring the rogue's futile attempt to catch up, she charged forward, ready to close in on her target. The mage flung bolts of raw energy, but they seemed to bounce off effortlessly, her skin shimmering faintly, before she retaliated with a terrifying speed, resuming her pursuit. His pathetic attempt at a shield spell shattered like glass against the momentum of her charge. With a sickening wet crunch, her left hand's claws locked onto his chin. With a bestial roar, she tore away. The sound of tendons snapping and bone shearing was nauseatingly clear as his entire lower jaw, complete with teeth and tongue, was ripped clean from his skull and flung away, causing a grotesque spray of blood and tissue. The mage couldn't scream, as frothing, bubbling gasp of air escaped the gaping raw cavity of his throat, his eyes wide with terror and pain. But the beast woman was far from done. Faster than a blink, she lunged, her powerful hands clamping down on his shoulders. With a guttural growl that vibrated through the air, she pulled. A horrific, tearing rip echoed through the silence as his right arm was violently wrenched from its socket, causing a geyser of blood to erupt from the ragged stump. Before he could even register the impossible agony, she twisted, and with another sickening, shredding tear, his left arm followed, spraying blood across the muddy ground. His ruined body, now little more than a torso, buckled. As he began to topple, the beast woman delivered the final, horrific blow. With a lightning-fast, upward strike, her claws raked across his face and skull. There was a sound like a ripe melon bursting as his head was violently torn open, the top of his cranium shearing away, exposing the pulpy gray matter within. His ruined corpse crashed into the dense underbrush with a final, gruesome thud, his body twitching for only a moment before lying utterly still. It was no longer a fight. It was a terrifying massacre. They had definitely underestimated her capabilities and were now paying the price. It was as if she were a parent play-fighting children, demonstrating her overwhelming superiority without truly fearing them. The renowned vanguard, the protectors of Leotre, were being toyed with. Eventually, only Ilarin and his loyal rogue Lyra remained. Lyra was bleeding from a deep gash on her arm, and her breathing was ragged. She had once been known for her deadly precision with daggers and unmatched technique with her whirlwind of blades, but even she was faltering, causing panic to overwhelm her. Ilarin caught Lyra's eye, a desperate plan forming. He shifted his stance, subtly. He performed a series of hand gestures, a code only the most elite scouts understood. Greenleaf, shadow dance, snake walk.
You need to disengage. Return to camp. Tell them what we found.
Lyra's eyes, though pained, flickered with understanding. She performed different hand gestures back to him quickly. Forest whisper, high water, dark moon.
Do you intend to fight this monster alone? I can help you. I'm sure we can escape together.
Ilarin shook his head. He knew the beast woman didn't intend to let her prey escape. He hesitated a moment before signing back to her. Ghost house, mountain water.
I'm willing to die for this team. You need to flee.
Lyra nodded, tears swelling in her eyes. Ilarin fixed his gaze on the beast woman. She stood there, calming, waiting, and whistling a tone to herself, with a devilish smile etched on her face.
Are we done planning? Can I finish my meal?
The beast woman said, licking his lips with a sadistic grin. Ilarin charged at the beast woman, with his daggers ready, and moved at an almost impossible speed. His movements were even faster than before. Unfortunately to the beast woman, he might as well have been moving in slow motion. She easily parried every blow and danced and weaved from a slicing blow here and there. During that moment, Lyra launched herself backward, executing a series of impossible leaps through the trees, vanishing into the pre-dawn gloom. The beast woman merely chuckled, a low, pleased sound.
Running already? Such a shame.
She made no move to chase her. The thrill of being caught and having to accidentally kill more mice was part of the fun. Her gaze returned to Ellerin, who stood alone now, his daggers trembling from fatigue, but his eyes burning with defiance.
And now, little elf,
The beast woman purred, a dark delight in her tone.
it's just us.
You are not going to win. Leotre will send an army for your head.
Ellerin said, grinding his teeth in frustration.
Your little threats even now are so adorable. I could just eat you up.
She said with a chuckle, her eyes betraying her playful tone, flashing a murderous intent. This made Ellerin almost cry out in fear, but he knew it was no use. He mustered all the remaining courage he could find, and decided he would be content if he only just managed to leave a cut or a scar. Something that would remind this monster of the pain she caused today. Ellerin roared a desperate and defiant sound while lunging with a powerful swing. But the beast woman moved faster than a shadow, slamming her fist into his face. Ellerin was knocked to the floor. Before he could get up, she got on top of him. With a desperate surge of energy, he swung wildly at her, trying to fend her off. But she was quick. She drove her 2 daggers into his forearms, pinning his arms firmly to the ground. He wailed in agony. Her slender hands wrapped around his throat, and a choked gasp could be heard. His panicked voice, cracked with gasps of breath and violent choking noises. Ellerin's eyes started to roll behind his sockets, and a maniacal laugh sounded by the beast woman. She let go and ripped his clothes and armor off his chest with a single swiping motion. The beast woman then dove her head into his chest and tore into him. She ripped and tore with her teeth, savagely searching until she found his heart. Ellerin screamed and shouted in agony until it was impossible to breathe. She then retrieved his still beating heart in her mouth and chomped on it like biting into a juicy watermelon, with a pleased look on her face. His body twitched a couple times before going limp. The beast woman stood over him, a faint smile playing on her bloody lips, her eyes cold and satisfied. She looked around the battlefield, her predatory gaze sweeping over the carnage before her eyes fell upon the archer. He let out a soft, pitiful whimper while he made his desperate attempt to flee, pulling himself along on his elbows. His shattered wrists throbbed with agony, and each jarring movement sent waves of pain crashing through him. A slow, chilling smile spread across the beast woman's face, revealing teeth stained crimson. She dropped to all fours like a terrifying predator and began to move slowly, creeping towards him. He turned to see her advancing, and a raw, guttural scream tore from his throat as snot and tears streamed down his face. Her face lit up with unbridled excitement and pleasure, as if she had just savored the finest wine and a gourmet meal. It wasn't long before she was upon him.
Please, no. I want to live. I'm sorry for attacking.
He begged, still dragging himself away, desperately seeking any sliver of hope for survival. His mangled hands flared uselessly in the air.
It's okay. I forgive you.
She purred, flashing a bloody smile that was anything but reassuring. The archer continued to crawl, but now her striped face was inches from his own.
If you forgive me, are you going to let me go?
He pleaded, a desperate, fragile hope flickering in his eyes that her blood-filled rampage was finally over.
Sure, you can go. Just get up and simply walk away. If you can get out of eyesight in 20 seconds, you're free,
she said, standing up with a grin that promised anything but safety. He was immediately flooded with a surge of joy. He tried to stand, but his joy was instantly crushed. He crumpled back to the ground, his heart sinking. He looked down and saw one of his legs was a limp, useless mess. His gaze shot up to her, and a bloody dagger was clutched in her hand, the blade now unmistakably covered in blood. Then the full, blinding agony of something severed surged through his leg before the entire limb lost all feeling, leaving him an even more helpless, twitching mess.
Go on, little rabbit. Clock's ticking,
She said, her tone sickeningly cheerful. He thrashed, whimpering, trying to move, but his body wouldn't move fast enough. His remaining leg kicked at the mud and grass, dragging his broken form just inches across the ground. His broken wrists flopped uselessly as he tried to push himself, leaving streaks of blood. The beast woman watched, unmoving, her grin widening as the seconds ticked by. The light in his eyes, once hopeful, dimmed quickly, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. He pushed himself, sobbing, pulling at the ground with his mangled hands until they tore and bled.
No, 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 no!
The archer yelled in a panic, directing his emotions toward an invisible audience. His breaths grew shallow and uneven as he scanned his surroundings frantically, searching for the nearest tree to take cover behind. Although the closest tree was just 6 feet away, it felt like it was miles out of reach. 10 seconds passed. 15. Just as the 20th second approached, his whimpers ceased, replaced by a ragged, desperate gasp. The beast woman lunged with her powerful claws extended, clamped around his head. She used her other hand, pinning his body in place. There was a horrifying crunch as she wrenched, pulling with her immense strength. The sound of vertebrae snapping and flesh tearing was sickeningly clear as his head was ripped clean from his shoulders, a fountain of blood erupting from the severed neck. She raised the dripping head up for a moment, the archer's eyes still darting around in a mix of confusion and pain. With a primal grunt of satisfaction, she brought her strong hands down together, crushing the skull with force. There was a wet, exploding pop as his head burst apart, brain matter, bone fragments, and blood splattering across the dense underbrush and dripping from her claws. His headless corpse crumpled to the ground. The game of cat and mouse was over for now.